This is Cold Start.
Today we're going to talk about kind of a special topic. It's Formula One season, and in Monterey at the Monterey Historic Races this year, they're featuring the 75th anniversary of Formula One. So I thought it'd be good to talk about something relevant to Formula One and the racing history that is that series.
And probably the most interesting piece of your garage.
Yeah, this thing, well, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but this thing came into the fleet in a totally unexpected way. And it's the biggest thing I've ever been involved with as far as cars go. And that's saying something because I've had some projects.
And I mean, the first time that I met you of coming into your garage and seeing the vehicles you had, this was by far the thing that blew me away the most. I think a lot of people, once they see it, are just like, how the hell did you even get your hands on this? So I think going into that story and talking about that journey of how this amazing collectible piece of history, however you want to identify it, actually came into your hands.
One day in 2021, while cruising the internets, that's how this story literally starts. I'm out there reading about motorsports and what's going on out in the market, just like everybody else who's into cars. You know, whether you intend to buy something or not, it's just interesting to know what's out there, what's changing hands, you know, what's the cool new thing that's come up on the block or whatever it is.
That's always the most dangerous thing to do, is just surfing the webs with no intentions, just looking what's out there.
It's so dangerous. And it was just post-COVID, so we're all in that sort of cooped up mentality and just want to go like get some kind of dopamine hit by buying a thing, you know? So I read this article, and I want to say it was either on Car Scoops or on Top Gear Online, and it was around March or April 2021, and the headline, I think, was, "Ever wanted to own an F1 car? Now's your chance." And of course, who doesn't want to own an F1 car? I mean, what a dream that would be. And there's a lot of these show cars around, right? You can get models or even full-scale one-to-one replicas of a Formula One car, but they're not the full thing, right? The tunnel's cut off. There's like a plate where your legs would go, and it doesn't have any of the internals, and it was built to be effectively an overgrown model. So that's not so interesting to me. I don't consider myself a collector. I want to buy things to use them. If it's a car, I want to drive them. And driving a Formula One car, I mean, who wouldn't want to do that if you were somehow given a chance? So I thought if I could sort of find out about this car, there's probably no chance. I probably couldn't afford it. I probably couldn't make this happen. But the dream kind of kicked in right away. Like, well, what if I could acquire one? What would I do with it? How would I use it? Could I even use it? Could I drive a car like that? I mean, I know how to drive a Formula 3 car, so can it really be that much harder? Of course it could be, but that's what started it. So I read this article and it said, hey, you know, there's this company who's selling the car. They're called GP Cars for Sale, and there's a bunch of specs about the car that were just fantastic and just engaged me right off the bat. The most exciting thing was that it was a 2019 Formula One car, and this is in 2021.
I was going to say, that's kind of unheard of, right? I mean, that's a really, really recent generation of an F1 car. There are collectors that have the old 1980s, 1970s, 1960s F1 cars, but you never see a more recent one come up, let alone 2 years old.
Yeah, that's why this was so just amazing and mind-blowing to see that this was even being made available for somebody to buy. You know, again, I didn't think it'd be anybody like me, but the fact is it was a 2-year-old car at the time, you know, not even 2 full years old. So I was just really surprised that that would be able to escape out into the wild, that somebody could go out and buy this thing. And by all the reading and research I did, it was reputed to be the newest or most recent year Formula One car in private hands in the world. So I was trying to steel myself for, do I have the courage to write to this person? The article said, well, if you want to find information about it, including the price, you know, you're going to have to ask. So I tracked down this company and found the contact information for them, and I shot them an email.
Yeah, I was going to say, you have to build up the confidence, because I'm sure there's so many people, kids, teenagers, whoever it is, that sees this ad and they're like, oh, well, I want to know more information. I'm sure this guy's getting bombarded by a bunch of people inquiring about it. Now, also, 2019, so that generation F1 car, just to paint the picture, that's when they were like really, really long, right?
Yeah, these are 18 feet long, these cars, and they were running the 1.6-liter turbo hybrid engine, which is ridiculously small given the amount of power that they generate, right? These are combustion engines that provide north of about 1,000 horsepower in a 1.6-liter plant, and it's a 4-cylinder, and they add to it some kinetic recovery and electric battery systems and so forth to even give it more power than that. But yeah, that's the era of car we're talking about, a modern era car. It's not throwback to the old Cosworth V8s that were so cool and sounded so great. That maybe is the one downside of this car, if there's anything, is this era of cars maybe doesn't sound like the best of all the Formula One cars.
But it's kind of cool that it was the generation of car before the current car, right? So after this car, they switched the rule books and they became shorter, less aggressive looking aerodynamics and all that sort of stuff. So maybe because they were getting ready to make this rule change and the cars were going to be changing so much, it was okay that one of these was going to enter into the wild because no one else was going to be able to buy it and steal all of the intellectual property of what made a Toro Rosso fast in 2019.
Yeah, and we should say this is the 2019 Toro Rosso, what they called the STR14, chassis number 4. They only made 4 of them. 2 of them were test mules, so they just never saw the light of day. The third car was driven by Daniil Kvyat, if you remember him. Mm-hmm. And the fourth car was driven by Alex Albon at the beginning of the season as number 23. And then later on, Pierre Gasly renumbered as number 10 when they had a seat switch. Gasly had started the season in the Red Bull team, and Alex Albon started in Toro Rosso, and they sort of switched seats when Alex got the promo and Gasly got put on the Toro Rosso more junior team.
I think we can all recall this from Drive to Survive. This was like right when Drive to Survive was getting popular, and I remember that happening and the drama of one driver getting kicked out of Red Bull and going back down to the junior team, and one driver from the junior team basically getting promoted pretty early in his career in regards to F1. So this seems like this car has some pretty cool history. You gain up the courage to contact this guy. What was the conversation like?
Yeah, well, I figured, I could send an email. That doesn't cost me anything. And the worst thing that could happen is he says no, buzz off, or he doesn't even respond. And that's honestly what I sort of expected. But then I got an email back from this guy. And he said, hey, I'm really inundated with inquiries. As you might imagine, I'm hearing from people all over the internet, all over the world. He's not going to give me any details or any information, certainly not about pricing, unless I have a phone call with him. So that kind of takes us to the next stage. I don't know if I'm even in the ballpark of being able to acquire such a thing, but maybe I have more courage than smarts. So I went ahead and I said, okay, well, let's set up a time to chat. And I think it was a WhatsApp call that he wanted to have with me. And so we went ahead and designated a time. And he wrote back to me, said, well, if I didn't completely scare you off, let's go ahead and have this call. So it turns out that I call the guy, and he's a Dutch guy. The car was for sale in the Netherlands. And he was a little stiff on the phone, right? And maybe it's just the nature of, he was just being very direct and all of that. But I guess he was trying to size me up too, because, having a call with some random person on the internet who emailed him about the car for sale, he wasn't really sure what I was about either.
Yeah, and it might have been a cultural thing,
Oh, yeah.
Might have just been being Dutch.
Yeah, no doubt, right? But still very friendly and engaging with me on the phone to the point where he'd say, tell me about why you're interested in this, and I'll give you some details. And so there was this mutual exchange. I'm like, here's who I am. I have this racing club. We have a bunch of Formula 3 cars. We like to go out and race. We're looking at doing some other things. We're doing LMP3, and this is just the most amazing thing in the world, and I just needed to know more about it and help me have enough information so I could either qualify or disqualify myself from the candidacy from this car so I could save us both the time. And he really appreciated that sort of directness in return. So it was a good conversation. He told me about his story. He said, I have this car in my personal collection, and I have others. And he didn't tell me what the others were yet. But I asked right away, I said, how did you get such a car? I mean, it's brand new, effectively. And the teams, they don't part with these things.
Yeah, I would imagine that most F1 teams would hold on to their cars and put them into their own private collections. I know Ferrari, McLaren, some of the other manufacturers have large, basically museums of all their significant cars. It's so surprising that a team would just be so willing to get rid of one. So how'd this guy end up with it?
Yeah, I mean, Mercedes, Williams, McLaren, all those teams, they keep all their cars. And maybe every once in a while, like a once-in-a-generation special driver comes along, like a Michael Schumacher, and Ferrari will allow him to keep a car. Or a Lewis Hamilton, right, and the McLaren team let him have a car, things like that. But this was a Red Bull team car, and I guess they didn't feel as attached to the car as some of these manufacturers do. They don't keep every single one that they have, and they don't have a history nearly as lengthy as those other teams. So I guess they were just sort of less sentimental about it. Well, it turns out this guy's primary business was race trailers. And so he had several of these Formula One teams and WEC teams and other endurance teams as customers. They would buy race trailers custom from him. And these are those things that you see. I'm not talking about like an RV. I'm talking about those buildings on wheels that are modular, that convert into these amazing structures that they erect out in pit lane and in the paddock for Formula One and World Endurance Championship and so forth. So that was his business. And I guess he had really good contacts and relationships with several teams, including the Red Bull team. So in that relationship, over time, he had come into the possession of several cars because Red Bull let him know he was even helping to transport some of those cars, that, they weren't going to keep them all. And he saw an opportunity and decided he would try to purchase those and saw the real value. He had a bunch of show cars too and replicas that they would rebuild of old famous cars, but he saw the opportunity and what it would really mean to be able to acquire actually raced recent era Formula One cars.
And so I can imagine he was maybe collecting these thinking that they would be collectibles and that there'd be a resale market to sell them to the next person.
Yeah, that's right. And so he was telling me about the process of doing so, and he started to reveal a little bit of information about the other cars, but he said, look, I'm sure you want to see the thing. You've seen the pictures online and, that's all great, but let me go ahead and set up a video call with you and I'll walk you around my garage a little bit. I was so excited. I was like a kid in the candy store,
Ooh, what else is hiding in there?
I kind of wondered about that. I mean, my primary interest was to see this thing, make sure it was real. You read these articles all the time. People get scammed. They think they're getting one thing. They're maybe not going to see that. So what kind of person is this? He reputed himself very well. I mean, it sounded like a plausible story. And he was asking the right questions of me to sort of size me up too. So we scheduled this video call and it opens up and he's in his, I guess I'd call it man cave for lack of a better term. It looked more furnished or finished than a garage, but it was adjacent to his car garage. And looking around, he's bringing me over to this car, the STR14 Toro Rosso. And in the background, I can tell there's a couple others, but I can't quite make out what they are. So first and foremost, I wanted to get the tour of this car. So he walks me around it. He shows me all the ins and outs of the car. He shows me that there's this metal box sitting on the floor next to it, which contains the steering wheel. And it's just like you imagine a Formula One steering wheel with a zillion knobs and switches and all this display on the thing. And he picks it up and he said, this box alone is at least $50,000. There's a person on the team whose job it is to carry this from place to place. So literally when they fly to the next city, wherever the race is going to be, there's a guy who brings the steering wheel separate from all the rest.
Yeah, I can imagine that those wheels have an insane market value. I mean, how much technology and switches and everything like that that's in an F1 wheel, it would blow my mind to see like what that market value is. And it also makes it even funnier when you watch like one of these drivers wreck their car and they're frustrated and they huck this thing onto the track or onto the pavement. And you're just like looking, it's like, that thing has to be at least worth like $100,000 or something like that. So he's walking you around, you're checking it out. I'm sure you're just like taken back of just how gorgeous this thing is and how cool it is, and it comes with the wheel. Does it come with any extra parts too?
Oh yeah, well, we'll get to that. But at this point, I feel like, you ever go into an open house for a house you totally can't afford?
Yeah.
And you look around and you're trying to make like, oh yeah, I have other ones like this, or my house out in the Hamptons or whatever kind of thing. Like I have no such thing, but I'm trying to at least feign the confidence like I should be having the conversation with this guy because I still have no idea what the number is on it. So he shows me around the car. He shows me kind of a pile of accessories over in the corner. They were sort of stacked up. I couldn't get quite a good read on what they all were, but there were obviously extra sets of wheels there. And it looked like extra parts, like maybe an extra front wing. And I definitely saw a helmet box. So I was pretty excited about all these accessories. I mean, in a way, almost as much as the car, right? Because that really completes the story. It tells you about what this thing is, who drove it, where it was used, what does it take to actually run a car like this? Having done open wheel cars before, I know you don't just have your one set of wheels. You don't just have your one set of tires. There's no one set of anything. So there had to be some other cool things that might come along with the car. And they don't come with a standard seat, right? They pour a custom seat for every driver who drives these cars, except in Formula One, it's not just that bead gel foam thing that they wrap some Nomex around like they do for us in the lower ranks of Formula 3 or prototype cars. This was poured out of carbon fiber mold, and it was molded just like the driver who used it previously. And in this case, it was Pierre Gasly, because he was the last driver on the team at the end of the season when they got rid of the car.
So it still had the seat insert for the driver.
With the imprint of Gasly's ass in it, yes.
Amazing. Incredible.
Yeah, one of those kind of things. And don't get me wrong, I wasn't the world's biggest Pierre Gasly fanboy at the time, or even Alex Albon for that matter. They both had sort of fair to middling reputations at the time, although were showing a lot of promise, and they were very young in their careers. They've since become much more accomplished, both having had, good results. But at the time, it was like, okay, well, sure, it'd be cooler if it was like a Max Verstappen car or a Lewis Hamilton car. But if that was the case, then I don't think we would have even been having this conversation in the first place. I still didn't even know that we should be having this conversation in the second place, I guess. So showing around the car, I'm like, yeah, that thing looks amazing. He said, well, can you come out and take a look at it? And this is 2021, just post-COVID, and I hadn't been traveling for a little while, and I wasn't going to fly over a sight unseen just to check over a car that I still didn't know that I could actually make happen. So I said, look, I don't mean to be impolite, but I need to sort of know more about the terms of this car to know that we should continue to be having this conversation, right? There's a point at which I want to make sure that this is a worthwhile conversation for you to be having. I don't want to waste your time. I'm not a tire kicker. But at the same time, if I'm way off, if I'm off by an order of magnitude on what the price of this thing is, thank you for your time and generous hospitality showing me around, but I need to know more. It's like, okay, well, why don't we do that in writing? And that was the thing I thought was also very Dutch and direct. He wanted to have in writing the proposal and the numbers that he put out for me. In a way, it seemed a little weird because wouldn't it be easier for me to share it that way? But at the same time, I guess moving toward thinking maybe there'll be a contract on this thing and making it legal, I guess is what he wanted to do. And also make sure there was no misunderstandings. So he sent me an email with the specs on the car, and it had in there, it said, race history of this car. Came second place in the Brazil Grand Prix when Pierre Gasly was driving. We'll talk more about that. It had 85 total championship points, so this car came in sixth place overall in the series, so pretty solid. It raced, the whole season through. They had some parts that they had to swap out and repairs that were made because there were crashes in the car. It was the real deal. It was the whole thing, and it was exciting. In addition to the car, there was the two sets of tires with wheels mounted. So the Pirelli yellow striped sidewall tires mounted on these wheels.
Which, I mean, that alone is so cool, right? Like, I think any one of us would be like, if I could just buy one Formula One wheel and tire, I'd be ecstatic.
Hell yeah. And to be able to get a hold of those tires, right? They hold those really tightly, getting one at all, even if it's just a prop wheel or a moving tire.
Yeah,
sometimes
transport
tires. Yeah, still, that'd be a super cool thing. It came with the two wheel bolts, basically the lugs that you use and you put on the wheel hubs to get the wheels on and off, like what they use with the guns. Pauli is the company. They make these super high torque wheel guns for getting the tires on and off in a hurry. And you think about a Formula One pit stop, no joke. This isn't a 5-lug. This is a center lock, proprietary connector, this thing that has all this torque going through it to put the thing on and off.
Think about the engineering that goes into just what would be the socket, I would say.
Yeah,
the socket that goes onto the center nut. I mean, the engineering in that alone. And
there's a different one for the front and the back.
Really?
Yeah. So you had to have the right socket for the front wheels and the right socket for the rear wheels to be able to take them on and off. Then there's the car cover. It says Scuderia Toro Rosso on the front, made for this car. And there was a case in which was the original steering wheel and this, kind of metal flight case for it. And then there was a big crate where the extra wing would be transported and some other materials. So that's what the car was about. And they also offered, as sort of an addition, they had Alex Albon's helmet. And I forget exactly what Grand Prix it was from, but it was his original helmet in the Bell helmet box like you would go and buy from your motorsports outfitter, except this one was special. It was Alex Albon's. So all those things together, the full car, fully raced and fully intact, minus the original engine. So I figured I figured that would be the case because you can't get those engines. That's where the majority of the budget for the team goes.
Yeah.
It's all super proprietary.
And I would imagine that it's owned by Honda. So back then, Honda was the engine supplier. So I could see like Red Bull being like, okay, we want to sell this car. Then Honda just telling them like, hey, hold on a second. Like that engine's ours. We want to take that back. And I'm sure there's a bunch of intellectual property and tricks and who knows what goes into. I mean, making 1,000 horsepower in that small of an engine.
Yeah.
I'm sure Honda's like, hey, nope, there's a little bit of secrets in that. We'll take that back. So it didn't have the engine in it. Was there anything else that was taken out?
Yeah, well, more about the engine real quick. They were calling it at that time the Svelte or the size 0 engine because it was so small and the compartment that it fit in the car was so tiny. So there was no engine in it. The other kinds of intellectual property that they really wanted to protect, the programming, right? The ECU of the car that is required for that engine to work and required for them to get the kind of performance and mappings and things they want to. That was also not included in the car. There were some hydraulics that they removed as well. I think they said that was for safety reasons.
Interesting.
I'm not sure exactly what those are. And then the last thing that was not included were the FIA cameras. So all around these cars, especially in the late 2010s era, the cars got instrumented with all kinds of cameras and sensors all around them. So the FIA kept their cameras, but there was a 3D printed housing in the place where the primary camera that gives you the kind of view you get with onboards would be, just so the aerodynamics of the car would remain intact.
Yeah.
So all of those were the things that weren't included, but otherwise it was a full car. They used this thing called a dummy frame in place of where the engine would have gone because it helps to hold the car together. One thing a lot of people maybe not realize is the engine is a stressed member of the chassis in a Formula One car, which is to say it's part of the structure of the car. And if you take the engine out, it makes a weak point right at the middle of the car, and there's still additional car well behind this thing.
Yeah.
So it's mid-engine, right? So they have to have something that can hold that structure together and keep it durable. So they build this frame, they call it a dummy, that holds the car together and prevents it, from effectively buckling at the point where there used to be an engine and a lot of mass as well. So that was in the car. Otherwise, it was the whole thing. Carbon brakes, the original Red Bull gearbox, the part numbers all over the car, the tire hubs, every single little nook and cranny you look at on this car, there's a part number. And it's a specific part number. They all say TR dash or RB dash for Red Bull. So that was pretty cool. It had the full proprietary Red Bull gearbox still intact, but the connectors weren't on there. So you would have to figure out the pinouts or have to do some kind of tracing to figure out what those types of connectors were, how the electronic signal was being sent over them. Again, there was no ECU. So figuring those things out would be sort of challenging. It had a moving steering wheel, so just like a Momo steering wheel like you might put on a club racer.
Yeah, super basic.
Yeah, really basic. That was on to move the car around because they didn't want to keep this very expensive and proprietary steering wheel on the car. It had the DRS rear wing with the servo that was engaged, so there would be a flap that they would pull on the steering wheel that would drop the back wing, and there was this kind of mechanism that would allow that to open and close. That was still fully intact on the car. And then some memorabilia and other merchandise. So that was like the complete package and kind of blew me away at this point. And the wheels started to turn and I said, geez, if there's any way I can do this, it would be amazing to be able to drive this car myself, of course. But wouldn't this be an opportunity for existing Formula One drivers and aspiring Formula One drivers, Formula 2 drivers who cannot possibly get seat time in a real Formula One car or can't get enough time in a Formula One car to do testing because there's limitations on what you can do with the current season Formula One car. People who aren't the drivers aren't allowed to use them. You can't just go take them out for an extra track day and test them down or shake them down or anything like that. So I thought there was maybe a business here, right? This car, if we could make it run and make it usable, there would be people who'd be very willing at the highest levels of racing, to rent it from me, to use it for their own arrive and drive days, to have the opportunity to drive a Formula One car. And, they'd all have to get in line behind me because I really wanted to drive the thing.
You're building up in your head ways to justify this purchase of you really wanted to drive it. So you had the full expectations of, okay, it doesn't have an engine. I think I can get that figured out. We could probably get this thing running. And so once you hear the number, which I would imagine that talking about what is an F1 car worth, whether it has an engine, whether it doesn't have an engine, would be a very difficult thing to do. It's not like you can go on like Facebook Marketplace, bring a trailer, whatever, and like figure out what is the market value of a 2019 F1 car given this race history, given these drivers. I would imagine it's kind of a free-for-all for the most part.
Yeah, there's no comps, right? It's like buying that really unique house and there's nothing else like it. And you say, well, what else is like it that I can compare it to? And they go, there's nothing. There were some early 2010s cars that hit the market. The Sauber team sold some cars. And there was an outfit in the UK called TDF, Tour de Force, who was retrofitting those cars with other engines and more simplistic mechanisms inside to make them usable by mere mortals, to the point where that could actually get out on a track day and be used in special events. And there were a few other ones like that, maybe the early 2000s. I mentioned the Schumacher car. There was a Lewis Hamilton car that was floating around, a McLaren car. And those things went for crazy numbers. I want to say like 10 million plus.
Jeez.
Which is way out of my league. But I finally get this number, and of course it's in euro. And I look at it, and it's a big number, but it was not what I thought. I thought it would cost like a house in California kind of price.
Yeah.
And I wasn't willing to sell mine to get this car, as much as it was tempting. I wouldn't be popular at home if I did that. But it was within the realm of, other cars that are out on the market that people buy and sell on the regular, stuff you see on Bring a Trailer prices.
Yeah. So it didn't scare you. You're like, oh, wow, okay, this is actually might become real.
It was intimidating, I'll say, but it didn't scare me away. It was maybe my own lack of good estimation of, is this something I should actually be getting myself into? Because I had these like delusions of grandeur. I'd drive the car, I'd get an engine made for it or retrofit to it or somehow. And Honda, who we mentioned earlier, they really keep all their engines. If you know that Honda was a supplier for the IndyCar engines for a long time, those are leases. Those teams aren't even allowed to keep the engines that run in those cars. They lease them with the provision that they must be used in the IndyCar season and they must be returned to Honda as effectively a sealed black box. So there wasn't any way I was going to get my hands on an engine. I did go down the path of trying to research and explore getting an engine, and I went to Honda because I thought, like, they have these cars that they use for IndyCar. Maybe there's a way to get this. And they kind of shared with me, Honda Racing, that there was no way that they would allow one of these engines out of their site.
They're probably like, huh, who are you? Why are we going to give you a motor? Yeah, no, that's funny. It was a similar story. We went to Firestone when we were trying to get tires for the road course sprint car because it was the exact same sizing as an Indy car. And we're like, oh, if we can get these tires, that'd be awesome. Like Firestone Reds, like that'd be perfect.
Oh, yeah.
And same sort of thing. They laughed at us. And the tires are the same way in IndyCar where they're all bar-coded. They get given to the teams. They all have to come back to Firestone. And so like they don't go out in the public. So anyway, before we get too far down the story of what you were trying to do with this car and what happened once you got it, obviously you made a deal and the car ends up in your possession. What is the transport like? I mean, this car had to come international from Europe to get itself to California. And if I'm imagining an F1 car, like those things aren't the most robust thing in the world. There's fragile pieces on the car. So how did it get from Europe to California?
Yeah, well, it started out in the Netherlands. So the guy sent me some videos of the car. And in this video, I could see in his garage what at least one of those other cars was. And it was the 2017 Toro Rosso, what they called the STR14, driven by Carlos Sainz.
Oh, and cool.
Super cool. The livery wasn't quite as cool as it was on the 2019, but pretty close. That red and blue, that's super iconic, and the color of the paint and everything on that looks so good. So I could tell that's in the background, and then I saw another car. I go, wait a minute. And I go, is that? He goes, that's my retirement. I go, that's the Max car, isn't it? He said, yeah. And I think it was the 2015 Max Verstappen car with, again, a little bit of a different livery on the car. But I said, oh, well, could we talk about that car? He says, no, that's my retirement. There's no way I'm letting that out of my sight. And he's a Dutch guy, and Max Verstappen, of course,
that's insane. Yeah.
is a Belgian-Dutch driver. So,
and every time Max wins a championship, the price of that car goes up.
I'm sure that guy's sitting pretty for his retirement if
That's
he hasn't
crazy.
already. So we're putting together the car for transport. He's got it in a transporter that loads in from the side. It was really interesting. Most of them you see kind of roll up through the back. I hadn't seen one like this, very Euro-looking kind of setup. The thing's got tie-downs on the tires. It looks like it's comfy in its little spot in the side of this trailer. And it looked like he was also really experienced at getting cars in and out of his shop. I mean, that's what they do. They're the Race Trailers company. So
I was going to say, he's the one that's designing these trailers to work with F1 cars. So I'm sure it was a pretty easy process for him.
For him, yeah. And then the next thing was importation to the States. So in order to acquire something like this, it's not like just buying clothes or buying a piece of art that they just ship to you, right? There's customs and taxes and all this stuff that are involved.
Yeah, what is the importation like? Because like I'm sure you have to sign forms to be like, this is a race car, not a real car, and like, you know, because it's a little more difficult than a model. It's a race car.
Yeah, and even on an importation of a race car into the United States, you have to sign a waiver with the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and I think also with NHTSA, the National Highway Transport Safety Foundation or something like that.
The fun police, basically.
The fun police. National Highway Transport Safety Administration. You have to agree in writing that you'll never convert this to a road-going car because it doesn't have all the safety and emissions gear that a road-going car would need. That's why it makes it so hard to import cars into the U.S. before they're 25 years old.
Makes sense.
So there was importation restrictions on this car, and fortunately, I wasn't a citizen of the EU. So I wouldn't have to pay what they call their value-added tax, or VAT, on top of it, which would have socked an extra 20 or 25% right on top of the price right away.
Oh, my God.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
Which nobody needs. So we were able to work through that, and he was really helpful with that whole process. Again, really experienced with that. And then there was a matter of the transportation itself. So we had really all of two options. One was send it over in a container on a ship, and the other was to fly it over. And at this point, I said, look, for the amount of money we're talking about, I would be devastated if a one-of-one irreplaceable thing came over in a container on a ship and there was something that went wrong on the way. Like, you see these stories where there's a bad storm in the North Sea and the container ship capsizes and all these containers go into the water.
Wasn't there a bunch of Porsches that ended up in the bottom of the ocean?
Yeah, there was an entire shipment of, I want to say, 991 era Porsches, maybe all RS cars even, that wound up at the bottom of the ocean. Tens of thousands of feet down.
It's just gone.
This is like James Cameron territory, right? The idea and the specter of putting it on a boat and sending it over to me in a couple of months, maybe it'll get to me, and who knows what condition it'll be in and all that stuff. Like that just sounds kind of no bueno. I don't think that's the way I want to do this. But oh geez, this thing's huge. How much is it going to cost to fly to me? So he's like, don't worry about it. We do this all the time. That's how
the F1 teams have to transport their cars from country to country. I would imagine they do so by air.
Yeah, they have these cargo planes that are set up for this kind of thing. And so they went and they got me a quote for the transport, and it was a large number. It was a small compact vehicle in and of itself just for the transport. But it was, again, a fraction of the total purchase price. And given all the offset of risk and my desire to have the thing we've talked about before, you want to get the toy, you're going to get the toy, you're waiting to get the toy, you better get the damn toy. I wanted it in a hurry. I don't want to wait around. So I said, okay, well, let's go ahead and bite the bullet and we'll do the air freight. So this thing was set up on transporter, flown over from the EU, from the Netherlands, over to Seattle, Washington, where I was living at the time. And at SeaTac, the name of the airport, there's a cargo terminal where you go pick up your large and oversized sort of deliveries. So I roll up to this thing, and accompanying me is the company that looks after the Formula 3 car fleet that we were using for Flying Husky Racing, our racing club.
Uh-huh.
And they're expert in all kinds of vintage cars. And in fact, the Formula 3 cars that I had were newer than most of the things they worked on. Mm-hmm. They worked on a lot of old LMP1, prototype, Formula 1, historic classics. Like they had Dan Gurney cars. I mean, all kinds of cool, really old stuff. So they were set up well for trailering this thing from the airport back to their shop. So we show up at the airport, and I walk into this terminal, and I have to sign a bunch of papers to get access, and they make me wear a high-vis vest to go into this area. And I see a guy pushing a pallet that has what looks like cellophane-wrapped gigantic tires on it. I'm like, oh, that must be me.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and so they're literally this black cellophane wrap all around the outside of the tires, and obviously with the wheels inside, stacked up 3 or 4 high and a couple stacks of these, and that's on its own pallet on a forklift, and the guy's forklifting out these tires. So I knew more good is coming.
Right, and I'm sure, to paint everyone a picture, I'm sure this area just looks like a big warehouse at an airport filled with pretty much wooden boxes.
Yeah.
Everything's beige.
Like the least glamorous place in the world. Like the floors were kind of dirty, and it was a dank warehouse, and nobody in there looked happy at all doing their job. They had hard jobs, moving stuff around, driving forklifts, moving pallets. Not the most exciting thing to be doing.
Yeah. So bunch of wood, and then all of a sudden comes around the corner.
I come around the corner and I see this thing in the distance, and what I see is like a lot of ropes and what looks like, tie-down straps. But as I get a closer look, I realize this is the car. And it was tied down like nothing I'd ever seen before, across every wheel, across the body. There were pads underneath the tie-downs to make sure everything was protected. And it was on this giant metal pallet that they all referred to as the pancake.
That's hilarious.
So this pancake was literally 20 or more feet long and wide enough, to accommodate a Formula One car with the tie downs directly to the pancake. And then this guy comes around with the big forklift, literally scoops this pancake up, and now on the end of this forklift is an 18-foot long Formula One car suspended in the air.
And there's nothing really over the Formula One car.
No.
You could just see it.
Yeah, there had been a cover, like some plastic wrap or something that they used just to protect it in transport.
Yeah.
But that's all been removed at this point. They'd taken off a bunch of the tie downs. There were so many tie downs, it looks like piles of rope kind of like around the base of this car on the pancake pallet. It was just kind of crazy how much there was to secure it. And so they put it down because they knew I wanted to come check it out. And I go over to look at this thing, and I step up on this platform where it is, and I'm just like, I'm almost in tears at this point because this whole journey, it's been a couple months long. This isn't something I thought in my wildest dreams I would ever do in my life. And here I am, an aspiring racer, and my racing dreams were sort of shattered when COVID happened, and I haven't quite gotten back out there yet. And this was a way for me to get connected to this thing that I was starting to love so much and wanted to be doing more of. And here was this thing in the flesh, and it was mine.
No, it must have been absolutely insane. Like, I can only imagine, in this room filled with just wood boxes, and all of a sudden, like this gorgeous, we haven't even talked about the color of this car. It's like this deep blue metallic, like unbelievable. And I was so blown away to learn that these cars are painted. So it's like, it's not like it's just wrapped. Like, the depth of this thing is insane. And I can only imagine you describing it strapped to this big metal pallet and being hauled around. It must have just looked like a real life Hot Wheels toy car, mini champs, whatever, like the mini diecast attached to their base plate. It must have looked exactly like that, but like 1,000 times better.
Totally. It was like glowing in the corner. And this is in Seattle, where there's not very bright light any time of the year, really. It just had a luminescence of its own.
Yeah.
It was kind of like emanating that blue color you're talking about. Seeing the halo up close and personal. The halo was still pretty new in Formula One at the time. I think this is only the second season that they ran with the halo in 2019. I might be wrong about that. Fact check me, everybody. But yeah, seeing it in the flesh, getting a sense of the scale of the thing, it looked huge. Like, I knew it was big, but I didn't have an idea of quite how big. I get up on this pallet, I'm standing next to the thing, and I'm just sort of blown away. I'm almost like overcome by the emotion and the feeling of being right next to this thing that I knew Alex Albon and Pierre Gasly drove in Formula One. This thing was in that race where Gasly drag raced Lewis Hamilton. This was in the Grand Prix in Brazil at Interlagos. At the very end of the race, it was the Red Bull car and the AMG Mercedes car, and they were drag racing to the finish line. And Pierre Gasly kept his foot in it, came in second place to Lewis's third place. This was that car, and here it is right next to me.
Unbelievable. I can't even imagine. I even know my emotions of seeing this car for the first time in the flesh. And there's just something that comes over you of like, you see these cars on TV so often. Most Americans have never seen these cars in person.
Not even close.
And I've seen plenty of race cars in person, plenty of really, really cool stuff, but nothing compared to seeing an F1 car, a modern era F1 car for the first time in person. Like you're talking about, the scale of this thing is massive. I remember when we tried to move it into the shop here at Sonoma Raceway, of the amount of turns and sliding it and maneuvering it that it took to even get it into its position to be on display was difficult. This thing is significant. It has to be like a modern average car length and a half is how long this thing is.
Yeah, like a large SUV length, right? That's where this thing is, but it's an open wheel, open cockpit chassis. Yeah. And you just can't imagine the scale of the thing. And I was just, again, overcome with the fact that this thing, if you listen back to the Checkered Past episode where I was racing prototypes in Europe almost, my first race was going to be in Spain at Barcelona, Circuit de Catalunya. The first race that this car raced at in the 2019 season was Barcelona, and they came in 11th. Right? This had the history. It went to Monaco. It went to the Red Bull Ring. It went to Silverstone. It went to Monza. It went to Suzuka. It went to Interlagos. It went to all these places. And now it's here. And I can't believe I'm actually looking at it.
Having basically a piece of history, like that's what made that car feel special. right?
Absolutely.
It's not just an F1 car. It did these unbelievable things. It was Pierre Gasly's first podium in F1. And not to mention, once again, let's talk about the livery of this car, because there are some F1 cars that, in my mind, kind of look boring. Like there's not great liveries on some F1 cars.
Yeah, it's true.
This one, though, iconic, right? It is like the exact Red Bull colors that you would want, of the blue with the red. The rear wing especially is probably my favorite rear wing on an F1 car ever, because it was all of the Red Bull organics, which they were trying to push, which was like, what was it? Sparkling water, ginger ale, lemon lime.
And cola, yeah.
Cola.
These like sodas. They were trying to sell these organic sodas for a while. So each side of the rear wing, the outside and the inside, had 4 different surfaces, each advertising one of these brands of organic sodas.
And each one of them is a different color. So like one side was like yellow, brown, and red, where the other side was like this lime green and turquoise. Like the coloring of the car is phenomenal. I can't say it enough of like just how beautiful of a car it is.
And the sponsorship on the car, it's tasteful, it's not overly plastered, but one of the funniest things is there was this company called Moose that made some kind of, I don't know, it was an alcoholic drink of some sort or whatever it was, and they came up with a joke because some of the places where Formula One races, they're not allowed to advertise alcohol. So they'll change the name of some of the sponsors. Like you probably see that, the Heineken 0.0 or Estrella Galicia 00.
Yeah.
That's because in those places they can't advertise alcohol, so they have their alcohol-free versions of their beers right on the car. Well, in this case, instead of craft, whatever it was, cocktails, they modified it so it said Moose Craft Hot Dogs. Like the most random thing possible, and in a strange turn of events, like the most American thing possible.
Right, yeah.
So the fact that this thing came over with the Kraft Hot Dogs logo on the side was pretty amusing to me. And of course, looking all up the front nose of the car, you have Honda, you have Pirelli, you have all the expected things on there. And it just looks so good. And the depth of that blue is just unlike anything I've ever seen on any production car.
Yeah, no, it's an unbelievable vehicle. So you get it in your hands. Now, talk to us about the steps of like, what is it like, one, to own this car? Now, I feel like you have to feel like you're a steward for this vehicle, steward for this history. And what was the process like of potentially trying to get it back on the road?
Yeah, so we got it back to the shop, and I remember saying exactly what you were saying. I can't believe they even allowed me to do this. Like, just some guy who could, wire the money over, and it made a dent. Let me be clear about this. Like, this wasn't something I just did in afterthought. They let me do this. They let me have this car. Is there any restriction with how I could use it or show it or anything?
Yeah.
There was nothing.
That's crazy.
It was just mine to have and to use for whatever I wanted. So one of the first things I did was, at the shop, they had a lot of tooling, and we said, look, can we get a look at the car? Can we look under some of the panels? Is there a way we can kind of figure out how to pull the seat out? Because Pierre Gasly is a pretty slim guy.
Yeah.
And I'm not. So trying to get anywhere near this thing, there's no way with that seat in there I'm going to do it. So they helped me remove the seat, take the belts out from underneath it. I said, I'm getting in.
Oh, 100%. You have to.
Absolutely. So I get into the car and I slide myself down and bang my knees. But there's this pink foam sort of padding all down the tunnel. And it was so nice and sort of like luxurious feeling. My Formula 3 car, I still have scars and bruises on my shins today because getting in and out of that car, you just bang into the carbon fiber and it just hurts. These things are made to be protected and secure for the driver. And what a cool feeling it was when I looked in the side view mirror, when I looked to my left or my right, I saw this wing way back in the distance. It didn't even look like it was the same car. I couldn't believe how long this thing was. I'm like, that rear wing is on this thing? That's where I'm looking? I'm really sitting what felt like pretty far forward in the car. Of course, not as far forward as the old vintage Formula One cars where their feet were the crash box ahead of the front axle. But no, being mid-engine car where the cockpit was, it was very well-balanced car, and I'm kind of in the middle of the thing, and there was an awful lot of car behind me still. And what a kick it was to be inside this thing, or even just to sit on the tire of this car. I got a bunch of pictures taken. It was such a kick. And eventually we did go through the process of taking off some panels just to see what it looked like underneath. But more interestingly than that, I tried to get this engine. So I put out some feelers and I got a couple of leads. One was with a racing team on the East Coast that worked with an LMP1 team, the Rebellion team, if you remember them. They're a watch company, and they ran an LMP team for several years. And Rebellion wasn't an engine manufacturer or car maker by any means, so they worked with a third party called Advanced Engine Research, AER, to build their engine. And it was a high-powered V6. So a V6 could fit into the place of a short block engine. It produced a lot of horsepower, and they thought they could maybe re-architect the engine a little bit, in particular the cooling for it, to fit in the space that was so small for that 1.6-liter turbo hybrid space in the car. So I talked to them a fair bit, and it sounded promising, but it wasn't really clear that they were going to be able to do it and how well the car would run. This is the other thing. To run a Formula One car, there's an entire team of people dedicated to just getting the car started, right?
Yeah.
The engines run at such tolerances that they have to preheat the fluids and slowly circulate them into the engine block. So everything in the car is sort of seized up before they are able to start the car up. So they have to bring it up to temperature carefully. Then you add the electric hybrid system on this car. And there was a different team of engineers. There were like 10 guys who deal with battery and electronics and kinetic energy recovery systems and things like that, totally separate from the combustion engine and the mechanics and engineers who work on that stuff. And I knew I wasn't going to get anywhere near having that kind of staff to run my car. So I needed to find a way to make it startable, like by a push-button starter.
Right, yeah.
Runnable, ideally without all those electronics and electric engine kind of stuff, without the hybrid, make it just combustion, and to be able to produce a sufficient amount of force. This car wasn't very heavy. I think it weighs, all of 1,300 pounds plus the engine, but you have to be able to overcome all of the drag from the downforce on the car.
Right.
These wings and flicks, I mean, the shape of this thing is amazing and organic, but all of that produces downforce, which is something that's there to help slow the car down in addition to putting, additional force into the tires so you get more grip. So the engine had to be powerful enough to overcome all of that. So a little 500 or 600 horsepower engine that we'd think is very powerful in most vehicles wouldn't even begin to scratch the surface on a thing like that. You just wouldn't be able to get up to speed.
It seems like you're trying to solve the same problem that Mercedes was trying to tackle when they developed their Project One, because they were trying to use the power plant from an F1 car with the hybrid system in a street car. And they have an awesome video online on YouTube of basically doing exactly what you're talking about, of like, there's 10 engineers that are involved in starting the motor, and there's 10 engineers involved in making sure that the hybrid electrical system is active. And that was what delayed the AMG Project One, was they struggled to solve that problem. AMG, think about AMG, how much disposable income that they have and the engineers that they have on their team. And they had to develop this electronic system that could cycle fluid through the motor, do all these checks, hit, the green check mark on 15 checks before it even let you fire the engine. So I would imagine that, this is no small feat. If money is no object and you just have an endless checkbook, eventually you would be able to figure out how to put an engine in this. But that's an astronomical amount of money.
Yeah, my checkbook went into buying the car, so
Yeah.
my reserves for what I'm going to do now were pretty tapped, and I had to find something that ideally would fit in the car and I could run. Well, it needed to fit, and it's a very small space. It needed to have enough power, and there were candidates that might fit, but maybe didn't have enough power. And it needed to be that third thing, that stressed member of the chassis.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of engines, think about engines for road cars. I had a lot of people go, just put a 2JZ in it.
Which would be sick. It'd be rad.
Or why don't you get that Koenigsegg 3-cylinder thing that you keep hearing about that I don't know if actually saw the light of day ever. But none of those would really work because they were not a stressed member of the chassis itself. They had to be able to withstand that, and the connection points of this car, through to the gearbox, the drivetrain, and through to the chassis needed to be designed in such a way. So the number of candidates that could achieve this were vanishingly small. I mentioned that company TDF in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
I reached out to them because they had retrofit these 2009 era Sauber cars with an engine, and they got them up and running. Well, it turned out it was a former Formula 2 engine. They used to call it the Formula Audi. And it was a 4-cylinder, 4-banger that they were able to get about 650 horsepower out of with a lot of tuning and fiddling and custom work. But that wouldn't even be nearly enough. And in chatting with them and some other entities, they seem to promise like, oh, well, we can solve this. We can figure this out for you. But you know what? Anybody who says that they can do it and will take your Formula One car and a big check from you that's probably approaching 7 figures, they can promise you anything. And if they don't do it, then what? you have no car, you have no engine, you have no money, and nothing to show for it. You have a
Right.
half-built engine project, and what are you going to do with that?
Yeah, no, it seems like it would be such a challenging thing to do. And when I was down at the Thermal Club, TDF did come out and they brought one of their cars. And once again, yeah, it was one of those things where, like, yes, it is an F1 car. It's unbelievable to see it moving, but it didn't have that much power. I mean, it wasn't like an unbelievably quick thing. And they still had hiccups and things that they were working on. So it's like, yeah, you dump in all this money, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, what are you left with?
Yeah, you're left with this, I'll say, sort of hodgepodge of parts. And here's the other thing. I wasn't exactly going to be able to obtain carbon brakes. I wasn't
Yeah,
going
what
to.
are the consumables of, like, okay, heaven forbid anything goes wrong.
Right. What
How
kind
are
of
you going to rebuild it?
what kind of race fuel does this new engine that we're developing require? What about the other replaceable parts? If something goes wrong with this car, what am I going to do? Like, if even a little piece breaks off, it's not like I can run down to, the auto parts store and go pick one up. They're one of one. Everything is custom made for these chassis, and there's only two of them that they were racing. The other two were the test mules. So that's the entire universe of availability of parts for this thing.
You got to find someone that can do custom carbon work to put floors back together or something.
Right. Well, fortunately enough, I had a good friend who was working at Amazon as an engineer for a while, mechanical engineer, and he had just acquired a 3D scanning setup.
Cool.
And this was still, maybe early days for this stuff, but it was a hand scanner, like an oversized checkout scanner in a way, like with the red light that the red beam comes out, except this scanned in 3D. And so what we decided to do is we went down to the shop and we were going to scan the entire car from the front to the rear with the 3D scanner so that if, and I hope nothing, but if anything ever went wrong with the car and we needed to reproduce a carbon piece or any kind of piece, we would have the exact shapes down to, whatever it is, microns or fractions of an inch or something like that, so that it could be recreated in true form. That's the only thing that you can do. That's what the Formula One teams have to do. They come up with these models in CAD. It's all proprietary to them, their software. They produce these things. They're all hand built. What am I going to do?
Well, what, you can just contact Toro Rosso and be like, hey guys, so I bought your 2019 car. Can you send me over the files for all of the design and everything, just in case I need more parts?
Yeah, well, first off, I don't speak Italian. And second of all, I don't think they were going to give me the time of day. I mean, what was their incentive to do so? Zero. They weren't funded for this. They're funded to build the current season Formula One car and operate it and improve it. So I wasn't going to get anywhere that way. But thanks and shouts out to my friend Josh, we managed to 3D scan this car. It required putting these little decals on the car, these reflective decals, because the 3D scanner required those to sort of get a sense of distance and proximity around the car. And the first couple that we put on, we realized, oh no, we're going to have to remove these things from the car. And I don't want to be picking stickers off the car all over it and like making scratch marks and leaving adhesive. So we found equivalent to like painter's tape that they're using around in the shop for mechanical projects. And so we put a little bit of masking tape on the car, and then we put the reflective dot on the masking tape. It was a laborious process. Let's just say this. It took the better part of a week. We wound up with, if I remember by our rough estimation, 3,800 dots all over the surface of this car, all over the wheels, insides of the rims, on the interior of the cockpit, all over the halo, all these shapes that we had to capture. And then we took off the panels and we did the insides of the panels because we needed to know what both sides look like. So yeah, 3,800 dots, scanning just painstakingly. It took hours and hours to get the first few even working at all, getting calibrated. All this software, runs on Microsoft, so you know how that goes. And it was just, we weren't even sure if it was going to work. Well, after about a week of persistence and just living in the garage and listening to a bunch of loud music, like we were just in the vibe, like the Honda engine that wasn't in there, we were kind of vibing on, listening to a bunch of like Japanese rappers and stuff like that. It was just kind of fun energy being around the shop where they were working on a bunch of vintage cars. And here we were slowly 3D scanning this thing. Well, eventually we got to the end and he was able to produce a file of it. And he still has that file. I got sort of like pictures of it because it was enormous.
I was going to say, it's got to be so intricate.
Yeah, they call it a point cloud that you're building. And at first, we did it with too high resolution. So the files were just bigger than the hard drive on the computer would even allow. And eventually, we got a workable file and a 3D model built of this car and all of its parts. So that now exists. Interestingly, since this occurred in 2021, my good friend Josh went off and started his own carbon manufacturing company called Carbon Cavalry, where he makes custom 3D printed in some cases, but in most cases, modeled carbon fiber parts for cars. So you can imagine there's lots of custom intakes and ducts and add-ons to cars that people want for their passenger cars, for their road cars. And there's all kinds of people out there doing that in cheap plastics and fiberglass and things like that. And here he is. He's now producing these parts at high levels out of carbon. And he's since also gotten some contracts to produce real parts for companies, for manufacturers, for industrial sort of purposes to create these carbon parts. So he's doing great with that. And I feel really good about the fact that, he sort of got his start around doing that 3D scanning and stuff on this very car. And now he's off and doing this for his living.
I was going to say, starting off with something easy like an F1 car. So pretty cool start there. And it seems like obviously you weren't able to get an engine into this car. That seemed like maybe it was going to be too big of a hill to climb and too challenging to do. But this car being in your possession, something that was on display for the most part, but still was able to bring really cool stories. I mean, there's no way that you can have an F1 car and it doesn't bring cool stories and cool things to your life. And this past weekend, that car was just on display down at Laguna Seca for the Rolex reunion. F1 was celebrating their 75th anniversary. And so for that generation, your car was on display with, the greats of all the other generations. And what an unbelievable experience. And now this coming up week, that car is going to be in transit from Monterey, California, Laguna Seca, all the way up to the Pacific Northwest, visiting its home once again of where it came into this country to be on display for an amazing car show.
Yeah, it's really cool. I've had to learn how to have a collectible. I'm a driver of cars. I don't buy things just to put them up on a shelf. So when it wound up that this car was going to be something that I didn't have an engine and I wasn't going to be able to get one for, and it wasn't really within my means, maybe I thought I was smarter or had more money than I actually do to do such a project, but it dawned on me now I just have this thing. And it's an amazing thing. Don't get me wrong. I love every time I get to be near it to look at it. And I've shared it with everybody I could who came into my shop, but I didn't know how to really get it out on the road and how to make all that work. So it actually started with another friend. And one of our earlier episodes, I think our first interview of a guest was with Bailey Smith, who's the general manager of Club Wheelhouse, which is a social and car club here in the Bay Area in Marin County. And the owner of that place, Martin Lauber, is a good friend of mine. I know him from around Sonoma Raceway, allowed me and took benefit of displaying that car in his showroom for several months alongside other amazing cars, including the mid-'70s John Player Special F1 car, the Lotus car driven by Mario Andretti. So I'm like, this is the company my car is hanging with. That's super cool. And I really got a lot of good feelings about having other people be able to see this car. I was always so worried that something would happen to it. But in the right circumstances, we've been to those car shows where people touch things they're not supposed to touch and what have you. But by and large, people are well behaved and they know what to do when they're in the right environment. So that concern sort of fell away, and that encouraged me, why don't I get out on the road and show it more? That's how we wound up at Monterey this past weekend. And that's now where we're sort of returning to the place where we got this car back up in the Northwest. Our good friend Tom Fathy, who was on the show, talking about the Northwest Exotic Show at Carillon Point in Kirkland, Washington. What a great venue for this car to show up. Somebody I know who's built this car show from nothing out of his own passion for cars, who's increasingly built his reputation to the point where he's going to have, I don't know if I should spoil it all, but if you look at the poster for this event, there's a Pagani logo on it. He's been working with the Peterson Museum. This guy is connected now, and he invited me, and I had to say yes when he offered for us to bring the Toro Rosso Formula One car up to the Northwest. I mean, realize it's still such a kick for me to even recognize this is the second most successful car in the history of the Toro Rosso team. It was the car that drag raced Lewis Hamilton to the finish line. It was the car that Pierre Gasly was driving before he got promoted up to Red Bull. And now we see him doing great work in the Williams team car these days. And we see Gasly continuing on with the Alpine team. It's such a thrill to be able to share this thing. I always would say it's one thing to have a toy, but it's another thing to be able to share a toy. And toys are made to be shared. And I know I talk about them like toys, and that sounds like minimizing for them, but that's what cars are to all of us. We enjoy being around them. We like to move them. We like to be in them. We like to make sounds with them. We like to hear the sounds that they make. We like the experiences and the passion that they generate in us and each other, and getting to meet other people who feel the same way about those things. And this car has been a way for me to be able to do that with people who are passionate about motorsports and Formula One, and even people who know nothing about that, but they look at this thing like, that thing is huge. What is that? And I get to tell the story and my story of how I came into possession of the car and what I've had a chance to do with it and learn with it. And imagine I've had this opportunity to just sit in the car watching a Formula One race in the shop.
That's pretty rad.
I mean, is that something you ever thought you'd be able to? I mean, I couldn't even dream of doing that. I couldn't even imagine, like, would I want to do that if you give me the chance? Yeah, I want to do that if you give me the chance. So it's been a really amazing and fortunate thing to be able to have this car in my possession. But again, I'm not a great collector, and I don't really get the same enthusiasm and excitement for polishing things and just looking at them every day as I do if I get to go out and use them, especially if they're cars. And that's what they were made for. And when I first acquired this car, it was with this mindset of maybe I can use it as an arrive and drive car. Maybe I can drive it myself. And now that I'll say that that dream is on, indefinite hold for myself, maybe that's something somebody else could realize. Maybe there's another person for whom having this sort of collectible in their home, in their showcase, putting out on the road and sharing with other people, maybe it's the right thing for them. So who knows what will happen with this car from here in. If you're interested, get in touch with us here at Cold Start. But no, for real, it's such a cool thing and such an awesome opportunity to be involved with. I still get those feelings. I'm getting the feels right now. Just talking about it, I get a little clammy and choked up, and I don't even know what to say, and I run out of words, which is not like me, as you know. It's a special thing, and to have had the opportunity, I appreciate the people who made this available to the private market. I appreciate the people who worked with me to acquire it, who helped understand it, to take it apart, to put it back together, to get a sense of what it's all about. Thanks to you for helping to be part of running our operation here and being part of the shop where this thing has lived for so long, and bringing in people and your friends, and to appreciate this thing that was really just sitting in a dark corner of the shop for a long time and helped to motivate me to get it out into the world.
It's an unbelievable thing, and it's funny to say that one of my highlights of things that I've ever gotten to do in motorsports was dusting an F1 car. I mean, even to just take a spray bottle of wax and a microfiber and intricately, remove the dust very carefully, of course, but to be able to touch basically every single corner of that car for an afternoon and listening to nice, electronic music and stuff like that is still a memory that's going to live with me for such a long time, because it's one of those realizations of just like, did you ever think that you'd ever be able to touch an F1 car? And it's just, those simplistic things are just unbelievable, and it's awesome to see that a car landed in such an enthusiast hands that appreciated, enjoyed it, and is willing to share it, and the excitement that it gave me that this car was going to be on display at Laguna Seca and amongst great company of other F1 cars, and that it's being able to get to do this fun thing and share that love and passion with other people is unbelievable. So, I mean, huge kudos to you and massive thanks that you're sharing this unbelievable piece of history with so many people, and that you were willing to share the story of how you even acquired this thing on the show today.
Yeah, there's one more thing too. So somebody once asked me, like, what's the coolest thing you ever did with this car? You could reveal it to people and show them that it's cool, or get them up close and personal to it. So I did get to drive this car once.
There's no engine.
Well, there's different ways to drive a car, as we both know. Here at Sonoma Raceway, there's two sets of shops for the businesses that operate here in the sort of ecosystem. And the shop that was taking care of it and looking after it for me when we were trying to transport it up here was on the upper shops. And here at Flying Husky Racing, here in the Icebox for Cold Start, we're in the lower shops. And there's no status or privilege granted to those, but there's a big hill that you have to go down to get stuff from the upper shops to the lower shops. And it's kind of cool. Sometimes you'll see people driving their race cars down on the kind of access road. So I got with our friends at Cameron Racing and I said, hey, I want to bring this car down to the lower shop and I'm going to drive it. So very carefully, we brought the car outside. And at this point, we hadn't ever tested the carbon brakes to know how well they would work. We hadn't tested what would happen if you spin this car up to, slow highway speeds. what would happen going down a hill, steering it. I don't know. Is it going to hold together? We weren't really sure. So we had to find out. So since then, we have called that the world's most expensive soapbox derby race car. And if you don't know soapbox derby, go Google for it. It's people in these hobbyist clubs when their kids would carve a car out of wood and put some wheels on the outside and push it down a hill. And
Just
they were
gravity driven.
Gravity driven, and they'd race it. So I got to gravity drive an actual 2019 Formula One car at Sonoma Raceway, from the upper shops to the lower shops. And there's a video of this floating around on the internet too, I hear. If you could go look for it, you'll find it.
See, that's pretty sweet. I mean, and the thing is, like, once again, the smallest things are made so special just because of the weight and significance of the car. I mean, if you asked any car enthusiast, even though the car didn't have an engine, would you like to sit in an F1 car as it's moving down a hill, maybe going 30, 40 miles an hour, whatever it was, I don't think any person would say no to that. It'd be like, nah, that's too lame. It's like, no, of course, we would all want to like experience just moving in an F1 car, even if it was at slow speeds.
Yeah.
So did the carbon-on-carbon brakes work, or?
They work great. The only thing that was weird at all was there was this like high-pitched whine coming from the gearbox because we were turning the gears, right? But there wasn't any mechanism by which we could engage second gear or third gear. We just were in first gear the whole time.
Or neutral,
or
if
whatever.
That was an option.
Whatever the heck gear it's in.
So it made some noise.
You got a
soundtrack there.
But the thing worked great. It steered beautifully. The brakes worked. I was able to control the thing on the way down. It was such a cool kick. On the way home in my street car, I listened to, that song by Fleetwood Mac called The Chain? The second half of that song used to be the Formula One opening theme.
Oh, yeah.
Around the early, I'd say, 2010s era. And so listening to that just gave me the feels all over again on my drive home from the track.
That's awesome. Well, once again, Todd, thank you for sharing your story of how you acquired and were in possession of potentially the newest F1 car in private hands.
Yeah, what a privilege it's been. And thanks for talking to me about it. I could go all day. It's just such an exciting thing. If you're going to be in the Pacific Northwest anytime coming up this weekend, come by Kirkland, Washington, and check out at Carillon Point, one of the best car shows I've ever been privileged to be near or in, this well-curated show called Northwest Exotics Car Show. Come check it out. Come see the Formula One car in person.
Well, this has been Cold Start. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Alice.
Thanks, Todd.